What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a daytime talk show stage and ends up in the most explosive confrontation ever caught on live television? It only took one disrespectful comment for Joy Behar to push Denzel Washington too far, leading to a moment that left the entire studio in absolute shock. The atmosphere in the studio started off normal enough. Denzel Washington walked onto The View, set with his usual calm confidence, that composed demeanor he's known for. The audience erupted in applause. They loved him. Everyone loves Denzel. He's an icon, a legend, someone who has earned his place in Hollywood through decades of incredible work and unshakable integrity. Joy Behar sat at the table with that familiar smirk on her face, the one she gets when she thinks she's about to make a clever point. The other hosts were there too, but this was clearly Joy's show today. She had that look in her eye like she was ready to prove something, ready to challenge. Someone she probably assumed would just go along with whatever she said. Denzel sat down, exchanged pleasantries with everyone, and the interview began. At first, it seemed like it would be a standard promotional appearance. They talked about his latest film, his career, the usual topics. Denzel answered every question with thoughtfulness and grace, the way he always does. He spoke about his craft, about the importance of storytelling, about the responsibility he feels as an actor to portray characters with depth and truth. But then Joy shifted gears. You could see it happening. Her tone changed. Her body language changed. She leaned forward with this condescending energy and said, "So, Denzel, I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me. You've played all these heroic roles, these dignified characters, but don't you think you have a responsibility to speak out more about politics? I mean, someone with your platform, your influence, shouldn't you be using that to push for the right causes?" Denzel paused. You could see him taking a breath, measuring his response. He smiled politely and said, "Well, Joy, I believe my responsibility is to my craft, to tell honest stories. I think people are smart enough to make their own decisions about politics without celebrities telling them what to think." The audience clapped. They appreciated that answer. It was humble. It was reasonable. It was respectful. But Joy wasn't having it. Her face tightened. She clearly didn't like being disagreed with, especially not in front of her own audience. "But don't you think that's a bit irresponsible?" she fired back. "I mean, with everything going on in this country, with all the issues we're facing, silence is complicity, wouldn't you say?" Denzel's smile faded just slightly. "I don't think I've been silent, Joy. I've spoken about faith, about family, about education, about the things I believe can actually make a difference in people's lives. I just don't think my job is to tell people how to vote." Joy laughed. Not a genuine laugh, but that dismissive kind of laugh that's meant to belittle someone. "Well, that's a very convenient position for someone who's as successful as you are. Must be nice to just stay above it all while the rest of us are down here fighting." The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. The audience got quiet. This wasn't friendly banter anymore. This was something else. Joy was attacking him, and everyone could feel it. Denzel remained calm, but you could see something changing in his eyes. "Joy, I've never claimed to be above anything. I grew up in the projects. I've worked hard for everything I have. I believe in lifting people up through education, through opportunity, through leading by example. That's what I try to do." "Leading by example?" Joy shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what you call it when you stay quiet about injustice? When you don't use your voice to call out the real problems?" "I think I've been very clear about what I believe," Denzel said, his voice still controlled, but getting firmer. "I believe in God. I believe in hard work. I believe in personal responsibility. I believe in treating people with respect, even when you disagree with them." That last part seemed to hit a nerve with Joy. Her face flushed. "Oh, here we go with the God talk. You know, Denzel, not everyone shares your religious views. Some of us think critically about these things, instead of just falling back on faith." The studio went completely silent. The other hosts looked absolutely mortified. The audience gasped. You don't say something like that on television. You don't mock someone's faith like that, especially not to someone like Denzel Washington. Denzel sat perfectly still for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but filled with restrained power. Joy, I've been nothing but respectful to you since I walked onto this stage. I came here to talk about my work, to have a conversation, but you've decided to turn this into something else entirely. I'm just asking the questions that need to be asked, Joy said defensively, but you could tell she knew she had crossed a line. No, Denzel said, shaking his head slowly. You're not asking questions. You're attacking. You're being disrespectful. You invited me here as a guest, and you've insulted my values. You've mocked my faith. You've questioned my character. And for what? To make yourself feel superior? To get a viral moment for your show? Joy tried to interrupt. Now wait a minute, I never... Let me finish, Denzel said, his voice rising now, not yelling but commanding. I've been in this industry for over 40 years. I've sat through thousands of interviews. I've been asked tough questions before, and I've always answered them honestly. But I've never, and I mean never, sat across from someone who showed me this level of disrespect while claiming to be a professional. The audience started clapping. They were supporting Denzel. They could see what was happening. Joy's face went red. She clearly didn't expect the audience to turn on her. You want to talk about responsibility? Denzel continued. Let's talk about the responsibility you have as a host. The responsibility to treat your guests with basic human decency. The responsibility to have a conversation instead of an ambush. The responsibility to disagree without being disagreeable. Joy tried to regain control. Denzel, I think you're overreacting. This is what we do on this show. We have passionate debates. If you can't handle that, don't, Denzel cut her off, holding up his hand. Don't try to flip this around like I'm the problem. I can handle any debate you want to have. What I won't handle is disrespect. What I won't handle is someone mocking my faith. What I won't handle is sitting here while you try to humiliate me for not thinking exactly the way you think I should think. One of the other hosts tried to jump in, tried to calm things down. Maybe we should take a break, she suggested nervously. But Denzel was already standing up. He removed his microphone, placed it carefully on the table, and looked directly at Joy. You know what the saddest part about this is? I actually respected you. I respected your career, your willingness to speak your mind. But respect is a two-way street, Joy. And you clearly have no respect for anyone who doesn't echo your own opinions. Joy's mouth opened and closed like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. She looked flustered, angry, embarrassed all at once. I came here in good faith, Denzel said, his voice softer now, but still firm. I came here to have a conversation. But you didn't want a conversation. You wanted a target. Well, I'm not going to be your target. I have too much respect for myself and too much respect for the people watching this show to sit here and let you continue to disrespect me. So that's it? Joy finally managed to sputter out. You're just going to walk off? Denzel looked at her with something like pity in his eyes. I'm going to leave with my dignity intact. Something you clearly have no problem sacrificing for ratings. He turned to the audience. Thank you all for being here. I'm sorry you had to witness this. You deserve better. You deserve hosts who know how to have respectful conversations with people they disagree with. The audience erupted in applause. They stood up, giving him a standing ovation. Some people were cheering. Others were shaking their heads at joy and disappointment. Denzel walked off the stage with his head held high, that same composed dignity he had walked on with. Behind him, Joy sat at the table, looking absolutely stunned. The other hosts looked mortified, unsure of what to do or say. Well, Joy said, trying to laugh it off, but her voice shaking slightly. I guess he couldn't handle the heat. But nobody was buying it. The audience had gone quiet again. They weren't on her side. They knew what they had just witnessed. They had seen a respected actor and human being get attacked for having different beliefs, for not conforming to what the host wanted him to say. One of the other hosts tried to defend Joy. Look, emotions run high sometimes. This is live television. These things happen. But even as she said it, you could tell she didn't believe her own words. This wasn't just emotions running high. This was a host abusing her position, using her platform to belittle and attack a guest who came on the show in good faith. In the control room, producers were scrambling. This was not how the interview was supposed to go. This was a disaster. But there was nothing they could do now. It had happened. The whole world had watched it unfold in real time. Back on stage, Joy was trying to move on to the next segment, but her energy was completely off. She kept stumbling over her words, losing her train of thought. The confidence she had at the beginning of the show had completely evaporated. She looked rattled, and everyone could see it. The other hosts tried to support her, tried to keep the show going, but the damage was done. The rest of the episode felt hollow, awkward, like everyone was just going through the motions until they could get off the air. Meanwhile, Denzel had left the building entirely. According to people who were there, he walked straight to his car, calm and collected, like nothing had happened. Because for him, it really was that simple. He had stood up for himself. He had refused to be disrespected. He had maintained his dignity. And that was all that mattered. What made this moment so powerful was the contrast between the two people involved. On one side, you had Denzel Washington, a man who has built his entire career on excellence, integrity, and respect. A man who has never needed to tear others down to build himself up. A man who believes in substance over spectacle, in character over celebrity. On the other side, you had Joy Behar, who in that moment represented everything wrong with modern talk show culture. The need to create conflict for ratings, the desire to grandstand and virtue signal, the inability to have a respectful conversation with someone who sees the world differently, the willingness to attack a guest just to prove a point. And the audience saw it. They saw it clearly. That's why they applauded Denzel. That's why they gave him a standing ovation. Because in that moment, he stood up, not just for himself, but for everyone who's ever been talked down to by someone who thinks they're morally superior. Everyone who's ever had their beliefs mocked. Everyone who's ever been attacked for not conforming to someone else's worldview. The beauty of Denzel's response was in its simplicity. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't throw insults back. He stated the facts, called out the disrespect, and removed himself from the situation. Denzel could have stayed and argued. He could have gotten into a shouting match. But that's not who he is. He's not interested in spectacle. He's interested in being a man of principle. And men of principle don't sit around and let themselves be disrespected. Joy's mistake was thinking she could treat Denzel like other guests who are desperate for airtime. She miscalculated completely. She forgot that Denzel Washington doesn't need The View. The View needed him, and when she crossed the line, when she made it personal, when she attacked his faith and his character, he reminded her of that fact in the most powerful way possible. He left. The other hosts knew it too. You could see it on their faces. They knew Joy had messed up. They knew she had let her ego override basic professional courtesy. What's interesting is how this moment revealed something deeper about our culture. We live in a time where disagreement is treated like a moral failing, where having different values is seen as grounds for attack. Joy embodied all of that in this interview. She couldn't just disagree with Denzel. She had to mock him. She had to imply he was less than her because he didn't share her views. She had to attack his faith. But Denzel didn't need her enlightenment. He didn't need her approval. And that's what made his exit so devastating. When he stood up and walked away, he was sending a clear message. Your platform doesn't intimidate me. Your self-righteousness doesn't impress me. Your disrespect won't be tolerated. It was a masterclass in maintaining dignity under pressure. Denzel stayed controlled. He made his point clearly and firmly, and then he left. No drama, no theatrics. Just a man who knows his worth, refusing to let someone diminish it. The standing ovation from the audience said everything. They recognized authenticity. They recognized someone standing up for basic respect. And they responded accordingly. Joy's attempt to play it off fell flat. The audience didn't buy it. Nobody watching bought it. Everyone could see what had really happened. A host had abused her position. A guest had refused to accept that abuse. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't about politics. It was about respect. It was about how we treat each other, especially when we disagree. Denzel showed that we can maintain our dignity and demand respect. That walking away from disrespect isn't running from a fight. It's refusing to participate in something beneath us. Joy showed the opposite. She showed what happens when someone confuses having a platform with having permission to be cruel. And the audience showed which approach they valued more. They stood and applauded for the man who represented respect and dignity. They sat in uncomfortable silence for the woman who represented condescension and ego. This moment will be remembered because it was clear. It crystallized something people feel but struggle to articulate. The frustration with being talked down. 2. The exhaustion with having every conversation turned into a political battle. The desire for basic human respect regardless of differences. Denzel walked onto that stage as a beloved actor. He walked off as something more, a symbol, a reminder of what it looks like to stand firm in your values without being aggressive, to command respect without demanding it. Joy started that interview thinking she was going to score points. She ended it rattled and exposed, not by anything Denzel did to her, but by what she did to herself. She let her worst impulses take over. She forgot that respect isn't optional. The beauty of this situation is that Denzel didn't need to destroy Joy to win. He didn't need to insult her back. She did that herself. All he had to do was hold up a mirror and let everyone see what was really happening. And then he left. That's power. Real power. The power of character. The power of knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone make you into something less. And that's why this moment resonated. Because people have been in similar situations. Maybe not on television, but in their workplaces, in their families. They've dealt with people who think disagreement gives them license to be disrespectful. And watching Denzel handle it gave them a blueprint. You don't have to accept disrespect. You can stand up, state your case clearly, and remove yourself. You can maintain composure while being firm. You can win without fighting dirty. The studio was still buzzing long after Denzel left. You could feel the energy, the shock, the realization that something significant had just occurred. The producers knew it. The camera operators knew it. The audience knew it. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come. And they were right. Because this wasn't just a celebrity walking off a talk show. This was a cultural moment. A line being drawn. A statement being made about what we will and won't accept in our public discourse. Denzel Washington made that statement, not with anger or aggression, but with calm, clear, unwavering dignity. He showed that you don't need to raise your voice to make your point. You don't need to play games to command respect. You just need to know your worth and refuse to let anyone treat you as if you're worth less. That's the lesson. That's what people will remember. Not the specific words that were said, but the way one man refused to compromise his principles for anyone or anything. The way he chose respect over ratings, dignity over drama, character over conflict, and in doing so, he reminded all of us what those things look like in practice. In a world that often seems to value everything except genuine respect and dignity, Denzel Washington walked off that stage as a living example of both. Not because he's perfect, but because in that moment, he chose to be principled, and that made all the difference. What made the confrontation even more striking was how Denzel had given Joy multiple chances to course correct. When she first questioned his political silence, he explained his position thoughtfully. When she laughed dismissively, he remained calm. It was only when she mocked his faith that he decided enough was enough. The contrast in their body language told the whole story. Denzel sat with his shoulders back, posture open but strong. Even as Joy became aggressive, he remained physically calm. His hands didn't shake. His voice didn't waver. Joy became more animated as things escalated. She leaned in aggressively. Her gestures became sharper. Her voice got louder. All signs of someone losing the moral high ground and trying to compensate with volume and intensity. When Denzel mentioned his upbringing in the projects, there was a flicker across Joy's face. A moment where she realized she had made assumptions about him. But instead of acknowledging that, she doubled down. Pride wouldn't let her admit she was wrong. The other, women at that table were put in an impossible position. Their discomfort was visible. They tried to stay neutral, but neutrality, in that situation, was its own kind of statement. When Denzel addressed the audience directly before leaving, that sealed his victory. He acknowledged the people watching. He apologized to them for the awkwardness, even though he had nothing to apologize for. That graciousness, even in a moment of justified anger, showed everyone exactly who he was. Compare that to Joy's final comment. I guess he couldn't handle the heat. It was defensive, dismissive, and completely tone-deaf. The audience knew it. The silence that followed was deafening. Nobody clapped. Nobody laughed. They just sat there, processing what they had seen. That silence spoke volumes. In any other circumstance, Joy's audience would have supported her. They came to see the view. They were fans of the show. But in that moment, their loyalty to the show couldn't overcome their sense of basic fairness. They had watched a good man get attacked for no reason, and they recognized it for what it was. This is what happens when someone confuses confidence with arrogance. Joy was confident in her beliefs, and there's nothing wrong with that. But she crossed into arrogance when she assumed her beliefs gave her the right to demean someone else's. When she forgot that confidence should be paired with humility. Denzel taught her, and everyone watching, that nobody is untouchable. That respect has to be earned and maintained. That you can lose an audience in 33 seconds if you show them who you really are. And what Joy showed them was someone who valued being right more than being kind. Someone who valued scoring points more than having genuine dialogue. Where it went wrong was simple. It went wrong the moment she decided that having Denzel Washington on her show was an opportunity to prove something rather than an opportunity to learn something. Every guest is a chance to understand a different perspective, to find common ground, to have a meaningful exchange. But Joy saw Denzel as a project, someone she needed to correct. She forgot that he wasn't there to be fixed. He was there to share his work, his thoughts, his experiences. He came in good faith, ready to engage. And she repaid that good faith with condescension and mockery. And that's why his exit was so powerful. Because everyone watching knew he was justified. Everyone watching understood why he left. Everyone watching would have done the same thing in his position. Because it takes courage to walk away. It takes courage to stand up for yourself. Denzel risked being called difficult or sensitive. And he did it anyway. Because some things are more important than how you're perceived. Some things, like your dignity and your faith, are worth fighting for. This moment became more than just a talk show incident. It became a touchstone, a reference point, something people would bring up in conversations about respect, about boundaries, about standing up for yourself. And for Denzel himself, it probably wasn't even that big of a deal. He stood up for himself, left a bad situation, and moved on with his life. Because that's what people with real confidence do. They don't dwell on conflict. They don't seek revenge. They don't need the last word. They just remove themselves and keep being exactly who they are.